Hey guys, welcome to the next video in my COVID-19 reflection series. I don't remember which number video this is, but that doesn't really matter. I'm not always sure if I'm gonna do any more, but it's like I usually do them, if I think of a new topic to discuss. Today it has actually been 9 months of COVID. Yeah, that's 3/4 of a year. And if anyone's still keeping track of the number of days, we're on day number 275. But they're coming out with vaccines. And we're hoping that they're successful. But there's definitely a light at the end of this pandemic tunnel, but it's still going to be a long way off. And so, with it being the holiday season and all, I'm sure there's a lot of things. There's a lot about this holiday season that's going to be very different, and it actually got me thinking about some of the things we miss about pre-COVID life. See, I've actually been thinking, does anyone even really remember pre-COVID life and what it was like? Do you remember those days when you didn't have to wear masks and you didn't have to social distance and you could hug people and see people face to face? Well, I miss those too, and it actually seems like a lot of people are actually missing that stuff now. But I'm gonna admit that I think I've actually missed that stuff since the very beginning, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. But there's actually some other things that I miss, that actually made me think of this. See, as a lot of you know, I've always been like really interested in music and performing arts, and yeah, I really do miss concerts and musical performances. And it actually makes and see, I actually thought of this because like whenever I watch award shows like the American Music Awards, and the other night they actually had this Broadway special, and they actually talked about how music has impacted the pandemic. And yeah, I think that's what I miss the most. And I know that in I think it was my initial video in this series, I talked a lot about the ex-girl group Fifth Harmony. I don't know why, but yeah, I've like just recently like really gotten into them. And I just read Allie Brooks' new book, Finding Your Harmony. It is like a heart-wrenching story. Probably like the best book I've ever read, and some of it will actually bring you to tears. But yeah, and I love all the members. Camila Cabello is great. She's probably the nicest human being on earth. And Dinah Jane, she's actually, she's been spending a lot of the time with her large Polynesian family. And she hasn't been doing them that often, but occasionally she'd like do these like live videos, just goofy times with their family. And then Normani's the only one that hasn't been doing all that much, but for some reason Lauren Jauregui, I feel like right now she's like the one who I really focus on. I think it's because, well, for a while, like back during the spring, during the full quarantine, she was, and I talked about this before, she was doing this series called Attunement on Instagram Live, where she would bring up certain topics. And honestly, she is actually my biggest inspiration for this series. And if you haven't already, I actually think you should check her out. Her name's Lauren Jauregui, Jauregui. And see, the thing is, occasionally she would actually go live with fans. And I would hope that she would go live with me, but she never has. And this might sound weird, but part of the reason why I started this series, I mean, it's obviously not the only reason, is because I'm hoping that some other Fifth Harmony fans, aka harmonizers, and maybe even some of the older members, or the ex-members of the group, will notice these videos and maybe say something to me. Because I know that happens on YouTube, and the thing is, I mean, see, it's weird because, they're not a group anymore. They split up like 2.5 years ago. And the thing is, I mean, Camila, I think, is pretty successful, and maybe Allie. But a lot of the others, I mean, I'm not exactly sure how successful they are. And it seems like there are a few people that know who Normani is, but Dinah Jane and Lauren Jauregui, not so much. And for that reason, I seem to focus on those two, because Dinah, I think, has also gone live with fans. And both Dinah and Lauren, they actually posted, I guess they actually posted like phone numbers where fans can text them. And I have texted them, but they've never responded. I don't even know if it's their actual phone number. But yeah. But see, the thing is, like, there actually was an interview with Lauren, I think back in October, where I think she was actually talking about the pandemic and how it's impacted the music industry. Because it was like literally just before the pandemic hit that I discovered them. And I talked about this in another video of mine. I guess I'm just saying this again, because I want to stress it more. Because my first video was a lot longer than this, and this is going to be a lot shorter than that. But Ally Brooke was actually on her first solo headlining tour right when the pandemic hit, and she was able to do 4 shows, and the last show was actually right here in Boston on March 12th, the day that pretty much everything closed. And that's actually the day that I'm going by, when I count the number of days. It's been 275 days since March 12th. And I've often tend to think a lot about it, like on the monthly anniversary. It's not really an anniversary since it hasn't been a whole year yet. But I really am very hopeful about these vaccines. And I really hope they go well. Because, I mean, there's other annual events I miss. Like, one of them is, the Boston Marathon. It's starting to get dark. There, maybe that helps. But yeah, because, I really do miss, a lot of those big social events. And I know that other people do too. And, I really do miss seeing my friends. And, the thing is, for those of you that know, that don't know me that well, I've always been a really big nostalgia buff. I'm always like a very nostalgic person, and I reminisce about old times a lot. But the funny thing is, even though I feel like a lot of the old days were better, and like a lot of the TV shows were better, a lot of the music was better. Like I mostly grew up in the 90s, but you have to realize that back in the old days, the technology they had wasn't as good. There was no internet, and think about what things would have been like if the pandemic had actually happened back then. There was no Zoom, no FaceTime, no internet. And like when the internet first came out, I mean, it was brand new, and any kind of like video streaming service was a dream. It was impossible, and it was really slow. Like, I remember when you would used to have like a dial-up modem, and you would dial in and you would use the phone line, and it's like you couldn't even be on the internet without tying up the phone line. I'm talking about the household phone. And you would get these weird dial-up sounds that sound like... I'm sure most kids of this generation have never heard that sound before. But then when you finally logged on, which would usually take a couple of minutes, well, I mean, like I think the main browser back then was AOL. And I remember the default voice that would say, "Welcome, you got mail." That just brings a lot of nostalgia. But yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's other things I miss about the pandemic, and also TV shows. Because, like back during the full quarantine, a lot of TV shows, it's like either they weren't taping at all, or like the hosts were taping from their homes. But now, like a lot of other shows, like Ellen DeGeneres and Kelly Clarkson, they've gone back to taping in the studio. But they still don't have a live audience, but they do have I guess it's like what they call a virtual audience. It's actually kind of weird. Like, they have these TV screens in the audience with people on them. So it's like they're not actually there, but it's like they can interact, I guess. But another show that just came back a few weeks ago, it's actually another show that I've watched pretty much for most of my life, The Price is Right. It looks very, very different because, as you know, that show has always heavily depended on a live audience for participation, because that's how they pick their contestants. And what they did with their show is like they actually took like the whole audience out, like they took all the seats out and they like completely flattened where the audience was. And it's like now I guess they just choose the contestants from backstage. And not only was the audience, dependent on for picking the contestants, but the contestants also used to depend on the audience for suggestions, because everyone would always be going like this and shouting out suggestions. And now it's like, they have sound effects of a fake audience, but they're not really there, and the contestants can't take any suggestions from it. So yeah, I guess that's just some of the things that I miss about pre-COVID life. And yeah, I guess I'm pretty much done with this video. I don't really want it to be too long. But yeah, so is there anything that anyone else misses about pre-COVID life? I mean, I'm sure it's going to be a lot different from me. But yeah, I do want to thank Lauren Jauregui, and maybe even the rest of the group, Fifth Harmony, for inspiring me, but especially Lauren for inspiring me to do this series. And I do hope that one day when this pandemic is over, that I can meet all you guys, because you're like some of the nicest girls in the entire world. But all of you out there watching, I love you. Bye. And happy holidays.